Today our story leads us to Disneyland in Anaheim, California, a place built on dreams, but not without its shadows. It all began with a man named Walt Disney, and some say his spirit still lingers, quietly watching from behind the magic. Welcome to Death Kiss Traveler. I'm Marissa, your morbidly curious host, and your haunted guide through the dark side of amusement, where the rides meet tragedy and legends refuse to die. From real-life accidents to ghostly encounters, we're uncovering the eerie stories behind the screams. This podcast includes real stories about accidents, deaths, and ghost stories. Some content may be scary or upsetting for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Disneyland is one of my favorite theme parks. It's full of nostalgia and where my love for theme parks all started. This is my birthday week, so I wanted to make this week's episode special. I wanted to share my love of Disneyland with you. On a snowy day in Chicago, December 5th, 1901, a boy named Walt Disney was born into a strict but loving household. His father, Elias, was a stern carpenter and farmer. Guided by faith and hard work, his mother, Flora, a gentle school teacher, nurtured a different side of Walt, one filled with imagination. Walt's childhood unfolded in the sleepy town of Marceline, Missouri, a place of white picket fences and quiet streets, where the scent of summer grass mixed with the sound of passing trains. Marceline would leave an indelible mark on his memory, later reborn in the nostalgic glow of Disneyland's Main Street, USA. Even as a child, Walt was never still. He drew constantly, sketching animals and people, and selling his drawings to neighbors. He performed for his classmates and drew cartoons for the school paper, already spinning joy from paper and pencil. At 16, chasing a sense of purpose beyond the cornfields, Walt altered his birth certificate and joined the Red Cross, serving as an ambulance driver in France after World War I. The war had just ended, but Walt's journey had just begun. Returning from Europe, Walt threw himself into the world of animation. In 1920, he joined the Kansas City Film and Ad Company and began experimenting with cutout animation. Crude by today's standards, but enough to ignite something big. By 1922, he had founded his first studio, Laugh-O-Gram Films. It was full of promise and youthful energy, and destined to fail. But through every setback, Walt absorbed lessons about storytelling, about production, about resilience. In 1923, with only $40, a suitcase, and a single film reel of Alice in Wonderland, he boarded a train to Los Angeles. There, with his brother Roy, he founded the Disney Brothers Studio, a partnership that would change the face of entertainment. The brothers found modest success with the Alice comedies, and soon struck gold with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. But in a devastating blow, Walt lost the rights to Oswald to Universal. It could have ended there, but instead, it led to the birth of a mouse. In 1928, Walt brought to life a spunky, silent mouse named Mickey. But in Steamboat Willie, Mickey found his voice, and the world listened. It was the first cartoon with synchronized sound, and it launched Walt into stardom. What followed was an explosion of creativity. Between 1929 and 1935, Walt introduced audiences to the Silly Symphony series, featuring whimsical music-driven animations like the Skeleton Dance. He unveiled characters like Donald Duck, Goofy, and Pluto, each with unique charm and staying power. By 1932, Walt had earned his first Academy Award. It would be the first of many, eventually totaling 22 competitive Oscars. In 1937, the gamble of a lifetime paid off. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first ever full-length animated feature, premiered to awe and acclaim. Critics called it a masterpiece. Audiences wept and cheered, and Walt proved that animation could touch the soul. From the late 1930s through the 1950s, Walt led what would later be called the Golden Age of animation. He unveiled film after film, each more ambitious than the last. Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi, and eventually Cinderella, each etched into cinematic history. But the journey wasn't without shadows. In 1941, a bitter animator's strike tested his leadership. World War II brought government contracts and propaganda films instead of fairy tales. Still, Walt adapted. By the end of the decade, he was pushing beyond animation into live action, with Treasure Island, and even into television, setting the stage for an entirely new kind of storytelling. And all the while, in the back of his mind, Walt dreamed of something more than films. A place, a world, a kingdom of dreams that would open its gates in Anaheim just a few years later. Walt Disney loved amusement parks, but he hated what they had become. Dirty, loud, chaotic. While children squealed on rickety rides, parents sat bored on benches, surrounded by trash and greasy food stands. It didn't feel magical. It didn't feel like something a family could truly enjoy together. Walt dreamed of something better. He imagined a place that was clean, beautiful, and bursting with story. A place where parents and children could laugh, explore, and believe in the impossible together. What began as a modest idea called Mickey Mouse Park, tucked beside the Burbank studio lot, soon outgrew its borders. In 1952, Walt took a bold step. He formed WED Enterprises, named after his own initials, Walter Elias Disney, to design the park of his dreams. Most people had no idea what he was up to. He mortgaged his own home to help fund the early stages. This wasn't a business venture to Walt, it was personal. To make his vision a reality, he needed a partner. The ABC television network agreed to invest in the park in exchange for something brand new, a weekly TV program called Disneyland. The show would bring Walt's story into living rooms across America, and in turn, promote the park. It was a revolutionary blend of entertainment and marketing. The location, a stretch of orange groves in Anaheim, California. The budget, $17 million, equivalent to about $180 million today. Ground was broken in July of 1954, and only 12 months later, Disneyland stood ready to open. It was an opening day that would go down in history. Sunday, July 17th, 1955, and not for all the right reasons. More than 15,000 people showed up, many with counterfeit tickets. The heat melted the freshly poured asphalt, water fountains didn't work, rides broke down, restaurants ran out of food. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. But on television, 90 million Americans watched something extraordinary unfold. For the first time, a place existed where fantasy came to life, where Main Street USA brought back the small-town nostalgia, where jungle drums beat in Adventureland, where the Wild West lived on in Frontierland. Fairy tales danced in Fantasyland, and the dreams of tomorrow filled Tomorrowland. Despite the rocky start, Walt had done it. He once said, "Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in this world." More than a park, Disneyland was a philosophy. Keep it clean, keep it kind, tell great stories, and always, always leave room for wonder. In the golden age of Walt Disney's imagination, the park was a living, breathing canvas, forever changing under his watchful eye. In 1959, guests gasped at the towering Matterhorn bobsleds that rose above the skyline, its icy peaks hiding Disney's very first steel coaster. Below the mountain, Sleek submarines slip beneath the water's surface, inviting adventure to explore the unknown in the brand new submarine voyage. Overhead, the future had already arrived. Disney's gleaming monorail whisked riders high above Tomorrowland. By 1963, magic had learned to move and speak through the groundbreaking wizardry of audio animatronics. The enchanted Tiki Room opened its doors, where tropical birds, flowers, and tikis came to life through the groundbreaking wizardry of audio animatronics. The Tiki Room is one of my favorite attractions. It would be my family's mid-afternoon nap spot, and we would all be sleeping on the back row. Or, at the end of the night, we would be sitting on the front row singing along. In 1966, Walt brought home a piece of the World's Fair, the whimsical, hauntingly beautiful It's a Small World, with its singing children and message of unity echoing through the park. The following year, Tomorrowland was reborn in sleek silver and chrome, while deep in the shadows of New Orleans Square, a band of rowdy pirates took over in an attraction so immersive it felt like stepping straight into another century. It was a time where every year seemed to hold a new wonder, and the world never knew what Walt might dream up next. On December 15th, 1966, Walt Disney had passed away at the age of 65. He'd been diagnosed with lung cancer earlier that year, likely due to a lifetime of heavy smoking. He underwent surgery to remove part of one of his lungs in November, but the cancer had already spread, and he passed away just a month later at St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, California, right across the street from the Disney Studios. Despite his death, Disney's influence didn't end there. In fact, many say his vision continued to shape the company, and some even believe his spirit still lingers in places like Disneyland. They say Walt Disney was a dreamer, a man who conjured entire worlds from ink and imagination. He built castles from concrete and filled them with magic. But some believe Walt Disney wanted one more wish to come true, the wish to live forever. But somewhere in the quiet, a rumor was born, a whisper that spread like wildfire. Walt Disney didn't die. He was frozen. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. That his body, or just his head, had been placed on cryogenic storage, preserved in icy dark, waiting for science to catch up, waiting to come back. Some say he rests beneath Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland. Others say he's hidden beneath Disney World, deep in the tunnels. There's no evidence, no photos, no confirmed accounts, just stories. So where did these stories come from? Well, in 1967, just weeks after Walt's death, the world's first human cryopreservation took place. The idea of freezing the dead to bring them back later, it was real. And Walt, well, he was obsessed with the future. He dreamed up Epcot as a city of tomorrow. He surrounded himself with inventors, engineers, and futurists. And that funeral? Private, secretive, off limits, only added fuel to the flame of the story. Decades later, a tabloid claimed a former Disney employee saw Walt's frozen body in a chamber beneath Disneyland. No name, no proof. But it didn't matter, because by then the myth had already taken root. Books, blogs, cartoons, even the TV series Futurama turned it into a legend. Walt Disney, cryogenically frozen. Walt Disney, waiting. But here's the truth, if you want to believe it. Walt Disney was cremated. His ashes were laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. His family has denied the freezing rumor for decades, and no legitimate cryogenics company ever had contact with him. It's a lie. A beautiful, chilling, persistent lie. Isn't it strange that of all the dreams Walt built, The one people want to believe most is the one he never had. There is something special about how closely his legacy remains tied to the park he built. For many guests and cast members, Disneyland still feels like it's touched by his presence. And I have some ghost stories that may stay with you till your next visit to Disneyland. Long after the laughter faded and the last guest had left Main Street, the park settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm. High above the red brick firehouse, a single lamp glowed steadily in the upstairs window, a light that had once meant something very special. When Walt Disney was alive, he used the small apartment above the firehouse as his personal retreat, a place to watch his dream unfold in real time. To let employees know that he was in the park, he'd leave the lamp in the window burning. But when he passed away in 1966, the lamp was turned off. The heart of Disneyland, some said, had gone dark. Until one night, a cast member, new to the park and assigned to tidy Walt's old apartment, entered the quiet room and, out of habit, flicked off the lamp. She gave the room a final sweep, then made her way back down the stairs. But as she stepped outside, her heart froze. The lamp was glowing again. Thinking she must have forgotten, she returned, switched it off with certainty, and left once more. Downstairs, she looked up. The light was back on. This time, determined, she marched upstairs, switched it off, and stood still, watching the bulb dim and fade. She waited. Nothing. Satisfied, she turned towards the door. And then behind her, a soft voice, barely more than a breath, whispered, "I'm still here." And the lamp flicked on. Shaken but calm, the cast member didn't return a fourth time. Word of the event spread quickly. Soon the decision was made. The lamp would remain on forever, a tribute to Walt. But among those who worked the quiet shifts and cleaned the corners of the park where guests never tread, the story is told a little differently. They don't just say it's a symbol, they say it's Walt. Walt Disney was a lifelong smoker. Though rarely seen with a cigarette in public, he was known to take frequent smoking breaks, especially in his apartment or private office. Several cast members over the years have reported smelling fresh cigarette smoke in the firehouse apartment, even when it's been locked up and completely empty. There's no smoking allowed in the park, and certainly not in that preserved space. The sudden appearance of that familiar smell, often accompanied by a cold breeze, has led many to believe it's Walt stopping by for one last smoke break. In 1969, when the Haunted Mansion was finally ready to open, 3 years after Walt's death, many on the project felt uneasy. The ride had been plagued with delays and creative arguments. On the day of its first official test run, the attraction suffered multiple unexplained malfunctions. Doors jammed, audio tracks refused to sync, lights flickered. Finally, a long-time Imagineer reportedly stood in the stretching room and said aloud, "Walt, if you're here, it's okay. We're ready now." And after that, the attraction ran perfectly. But this attraction doesn't just house 999 ghosts. There are stories of real ghosts brought there by illegally spreading of ashes. A story for another episode. When the last guest exits through the gates and Main Street dims to silence, Disneyland is far from asleep. In the deep hours of the night, when only security guards and maintenance crews roam the park, strange things begin to stir, especially in the attractions that Walt Disney loved most. In It's a Small World, empty boats drift quietly through a darkened landscape. But suddenly, music echoes through the still air, soft, tiny, and unmistakable. The dolls begin to sway ever so slightly. Lights flash, figures blink and turn. Even though the control system is powered down, by the time a technician checks the ride, everything is still again. In Pirates of the Caribbean, guards have sworn they've seen figures shifting, pirates lifting their heads or changing their stance overnight. Tools are found moved from one side of the scene to the other. Once a worker arrived to find one of the pirates' animatronics with an outstretched arm that hadn't been posed that way the day before. And in the enchanted tiki room, after the last show is ended and the power is off, the animatronic birds have reportedly started to move on their own. One night, a parrot on the upper perch blinked and bobbed its head without a single circuit running. Skeptics will blame power surges, electrical resets, or leftover energy pulsing through the complex system. But the older cast members, the ones who knew Walt's history, tell a different story. Walt was fascinated by his audio animatronics. He saw them as the future of storytelling, machines with a soul. He often stayed late at night, watching test runs, adjusting movements, dreaming of ways to make them more lifelike. So now when figures twitch after hours, or songs suddenly burst into the dark, some wonder, is it a glitch? Or is it Walt still tinkering, still testing, still playing with his creations when no one is watching? And long after the last guest has gone, the music's faded from the speakers, there's a different kind of stillness. It's the hush of the backstage corridors, empty storefronts, and quiet rides. The kind of quiet where even the smallest sound stands out. That's when the footsteps begin. Cast members on overnight shifts have whispered about it for years. The distinct sound of dress shoes clicking steadily down the pavement of Main Street, echoing through the darkness. Not hurried, not random, purposeful, like someone doing rounds, checking every detail. A security guard once followed the sound, flashlight sweeping across Fantasyland. He thought maybe a fellow worker had wandered off course, though when he turned the corner toward the Matterhorn, the footsteps stopped. There was no one there. In the stillness, he caught a glimpse of something, a shadow darting across the wall and disappearing behind a maintenance door that hadn't been opened for hours. Another time, a custodial worker mopping near the entrance of the Emporium paused mid-swipe. Footsteps behind him. Steady, deliberate. He turned, expecting a supervisor, but the street was empty, save for the distant glow of the firehouse lamp. He listened, heart pounding as the sound faded into nothing. These experiences aren't rare. Shadows moving in doorways, shapes caught just beyond the corner of your eye, the sound of someone walking in the park after it's closed, not lost, but inspecting, watching, ensuring it's all in order. Ask enough cast members and you'll hear a common belief. It's Walt, still walking his park, still making his rounds. Because Disneyland was never just a job to him. It was home. And like any good host, Walt Disney is still making sure every detail is perfect, even after dark. Walt Disney had a deep personal love for trains. He often rode the Disneyland Railroad himself and even had a miniature rideable train in his backyard before Disneyland was built. I feel like Walt and I have a lot in common. I also would love an amusement park ride in my backyard, even though I'm sure my neighbors wouldn't love it. Conductors on the Disneyland Railroad have occasionally reported strange sensations near the Main Street station. The sound of someone climbing aboard, phantom footsteps, or an extra presence in the train carriage late at night. The one engineer even claimed the train's control system once flickered and acted erratically until he jokingly said, "All right, Walt, you can drive." After that, everything returned to normal. Was it a glitch? Or was Walt taking one last ride? It is said that Walt's presence is in the great moments with Mr. Lincoln. This patriotic attraction at Disneyland was one of Walt's favorites, and he was heavily involved in its development. It's said that he would sit alone in the back row during rehearsals and quietly watch, proud of what he had helped create. Years after his death, cast members and maintenance workers have reported seeing a figure sitting silently in the back of the theater during tests, only to find no one there. A maintenance tech once said he turned off the audio system and clearly heard clapping after the animatronic Lincoln finished his monologue. Some believe it's Walt still applauding a dream come to life. And in the Disney studios in Burbank, where much of the classic animation was born, there have long been reports of footsteps echoing in the empty halls late at night, lights flickering on, and the old hum of film reels starting on their own. One night, a young animator staying late reported hearing someone humming a tune, an old one. He followed the sound down the corridor, only to find a closed office door that hadn't been used in years. The humming stopped when he opened the door. The tune, "Feed the Birds," which was Walt's favorite song. He used to ask the Sherman Brothers to play it for him every Friday. The Disneyland Dream Suite is located above Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a lush, rarely used apartment originally intended for Walt and his family. Though he died before it was completed, guests who've stayed there, especially during special events, have reported unexplained cold spots, items moving on their own, and even phantom footsteps pacing in the hallways. A Disney executive once joked, "It's just Walt checking in to make sure we didn't ruin the place." Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the sheer number of eerie stories surrounding Walt Disney himself, often accompanied by sights, smells, or feelings, has given him an almost mythic afterlife presence in Disneyland. Many cast members don't feel afraid. In fact, most describe the feeling of Walt's ghost as warm, fatherly, watchful, like he's still protecting his dream. They say the dead can't follow us. They say the past stays buried. But in Walt Disney's kingdom, the past was never meant to sleep. A flickering light in the firehouse window, footsteps where no one walks, the scent of cigarette smoke in a sealed room. Maybe it's just the echoes of a dreamer who built a world too enchanted to ever leave. Maybe it's something more. One thing's certain, if you ever find yourself alone on Main Street after dark, look up. If the lamp's still glowing, Walt might still be watching. Thank you for stepping into the shadows of Disneyland with me. This has been Death-Kissed Traveler, where magic and mystery meet behind the gates. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that follow button. Give me a 5-star rating or follow me on social media at Death-Kissed Traveler Podcast. Looking for a Disney vacation? Sun-Kissed Traveler can take the stress out of planning your Disney vacation. With exclusive deals and insider knowledge, we know Disney in and out. Check the show notes for the website or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. We do not intend to defame, slander, or misrepresent any business or individuals involved. See show notes for references.